All right, thank you very much for taking your time out to attend this session. I know this is the last session for me. I've been traveling for 30 days across the globe at 4 different conferences presenting. So this is my last session. I'm stoked because I have some awesome demos that hopefully things are going to work out well. We did some good tests, so I have a lot of content, a lot of cool things to show you, and some new things that I'm sure you have not seen before. So we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Tony Sanchez. I'm with Citrix Systems. I work on our worldwide alliances team, focusing specifically on scalability on Zen Desktop and Hyper-V. I had a previous session this week if you are interested in a lot of scalability data, performance, stats, IOPS, all the good, boring stuff that is important as you look at scaling out your infrastructure. I did a session a few days ago. I highly recommend going and grabbing that PowerPoint. There's a lot of data points, tips and tweaks that you can grab from there. The objective on this particular session is we're going to cover a little bit more of Zen Desktop 7 architecture overview. We're going to go into 4 DNA designs. And what I mean by DNA is desktop and apps. Different ways to deploy desktops, different ways to deploy apps in terms of using the new functions and features of Zen Desktop 7. As always, usually with most sessions I do, I have a giveaway that I'll give away at the very end. So definitely stay if you're interested in getting something that's super nice and super expensive for free. Highly recommend it. Review and Q&A also, and then we will continue to go forward. If you were my last session, I will say a couple of slides here, maybe about 3 or 4 are repetitive, but that is only because some people did not attend. So hang tight, we'll get to the good stuff, but I'll go ahead and get started for those of you that are not super familiar with what Citrix and Microsoft do together in terms of the joint platform. It's pretty simple in terms of what we have in terms of market leadership for desktops, apps, scalability. It's pretty much a proven in terms of leveraging Zen Desktop on Hyper-V. The scalability numbers that we've done and the overall integration with AppV, with System Center, whether it's Windows 7, Windows 8, whether it's user-centric, whether it's AppV, all of those architectures are highly scalable and highly deployable in a Zen app or Zen Desktop or even together architecture. So for all these years, we've been working together with Microsoft to design and build the best jointly integrated unified management design that you can choose. A little bit of innovation in terms of partnership. In terms of when we started at Citrix, 1989 was the year we were formed. We had our founding forefathers, as I like to call them, or co-founders. Ed Akabuchi was a founder of Citrix in 1989, along with a couple other people. He recently did pass away last week, and so there was a big blow to the technical community because his thought and his leadership is something that is here, that you're looking at today. And he thought about things like this just from the basics of, wouldn't it be neat if we could do something like this over any medium, any transport, any device 20 years ago? And his vision is what's propelled Citrix to be the #1 in terms of market leadership for desktop virtualization and application delivery. So over the years, we've done a lot. It's pretty simple. We've obviously started at the very beginning with the release of ICA, our first protocol, and built up through the stack from WinFrame to MetaFrame. How many of you guys in the audience are old school Citrix administrators from back in the day? Quite a few. So you've been around. You know what's happened from the dark days, as I like to call them, of MetaFrame, when it was just a one-trick pony, when we could only do one thing, and that one thing was give you an app. That's really it. And maybe a desktop if you were bold. But primarily, it was application access. And over the years, we've gotten better. We've acquired a lot of different technologies, whether it's NetScaler, whether it's doing things with single sign-on with older products such as Password Manager, and building up the portfolio stack to really try to become that one-stop shop for our customers. And throughout those years, we've always embraced and extended the Windows Server and client operating system platform. From the latest to the greatest, from the oldest to the newest, we pretty much have been covering it for over 20 years. That's longer than any other partner that's worked with Microsoft. If you look at all the work we've done in terms of innovation, it's pretty interesting because you can see these awards are not just handed out because they feel like handing out an award. You have to do some serious integration, UI work, scalability work. And all these awards were given to Citrix from Microsoft over the past amount of years, from Global ISV of the Year all the way to Advanced Infrastructure Partner of the Year. And we're hoping to win one more next month at Worldwide Partner Conference. So got my fingers crossed on that one. But over the years, our products have innovated a ton, from being that one-trick pony to doing things in terms of doing self-service of applications with Receiver, older product names called Citrix Dazzle. If you've been around for a long time, remember that was the first name we gave that project for user self-service. Glad we got rid of that. It's kind of confusing. So now we made it much simpler for users to get to applications they want by just going through a portal. What's led us from then to now is a big change in terms of using what we call Project Excalibur, which was released last October at Synergy Barcelona. And at that point in time, it was ground shifting for us because it was the idea for us to go ahead and try to merge all of our infrastructure from delivering hosted apps and delivering desktops all into one user interface. If you've ever written code and you've tried to combine different platforms, and I'm talking big platforms, not something small, it is a huge task. It is a very, very big task. So years and years of work went into creating Zendesk Top 7, which is where we are today. And our mission and our idea is really about making things available from any device, as it was before, but really focusing more about being mobile, letting those different people that are using tablets, Surfaces, iPads, iPhones, Android, Blueberries, Crackberries, Boysenberries, whatever you want to call them. We support just about any device. And I guarantee you won't find another partner on the planet Earth that supports as many devices as Citrix. It's a fact. So all of that innovation, all that work in terms of mobility has brought us from then to now to delivering secure and simple access to apps. So let's go into the architecture where we were then in terms of 5 to 10 years to where we are now. In terms of desktops and apps, if you're a Zen administrator, you're well familiar with things such as ICA clients. The ICA client now has kind of been replaced by something called receiver. Still the ICA protocol per se with a much better engine, much better UI. But the entry point to everything was web interface. Still available in terms of the older platforms, but pretty much gone. In Zendesk Top 7, we do not use web interface. It's been replaced by what is called Storefront, which we'll get to. A lot of the consoles you see here on the left-hand side in terms of Zen App 6.5, Delivery Services Console, Edge Site, PCM, Power Capacity Management for throttling when your Zen App server should shut down and when they should boot up based upon maintenance schedules. A lot of this infrastructure has been moved and consolidated into the single UI that is in Zendesk Top 7. Things still exist. If you look at the database structure in terms of Zen App, you always required a database, which was where you would store things in regard to user information, access for your published applications, published app data. A bunch of data was stored in there, power capacity management settings as well. Over to the right, if we shift and we look at Zen Desktop, same concept applied. Separate database, separate storage location. Could be the same SQL server, but it was completely separate database. They could never, ever be into the same SQL database. Share the same server, share the same instance, but never the same database. This is what the architecture has been like and is like until we released Zendesk Top 7. That all changed from then to this. We went from that dispersed architecture, that separate UI, that separate database, that separate SQL server, if you went that route, to one interface, one storefront, one receiver, one studio, one console, one everything, for a majority of all the work. There are some things, I will say, that are not fully in this release of the console. Keep that in mind. Some things are still slightly separated. But the majority of your work for publishing and building desktops and apps is there in version 7. The normal stuff you do in a day-to-day task. So we look at what we still have. The VDA is the virtual desktop agent in version 5.6 of Zen App. It's also been renamed to the virtual delivery agent because we just don't make desktops now in version 7. It's desktops or apps or both, whichever way you decide to go. So the VDA is still applicable. You still need this agent inside your master image in order to connect to your Zen App servers or your hosted desktops. 100% required, still got to do it. But we support a lot more than just server or client OSs. It's now server OS workers. Server 2012, 2008 R2. If we look at the release simplification cycle, this is really what happened during Zendesk Top 7 over the years and as we got to the point where we just released it 2 days ago. So it is released to the web. You can go ahead and download it. There's an eval version if you have your My Citrix account. Log in today if you haven't. Download it, get it set up. The installation is extremely simple. We've done a lot in terms of making the wizard base install very, very, very simple. On average, if you had, let's just say, a desktop like this, not super fast, you built a little mini lab for yourself and you wanted to install it. The longest I've ever seen the Zen Desktop's installation take is 12 minutes. And that's because I installed SQL Express. If I omit SQL Express and I use a real SQL database that I use with the rest of my infrastructure, it's about 8 minutes to 9 minutes. Take that into consideration. Slower machine, you may be a little bit slower than that, but I've never seen it go more than 12 minutes for just installing the controller and getting the basics that you need. So a lot of innovation, a lot of configuration from wizards to licensing, that's all embedded, all within the Studio console. No need to bounce back and forth between the licensing console if you're familiar with that. It's all within the same console. It's there and it's accessible. Delegated admin and logging, one of the biggest things that makes us stand out is the amount of logging administrative features we can have. Locking down rights so that certain desktop administrators and owners can't do what they're not supposed to do, which is make a mistake in your farm. Publish a desktop or an app to the wrong person who's not in finance. That sort of auditing, that sort of reporting is available in XenDesktop 7. So it's a big differentiator between us and our competitors, especially if you're looking at HIPAA or SOX compliance in an organization. In terms of next gen, of course, we support Windows 8, Server 2012, working on supporting the newest stuff, which you just heard about, Windows 8.1 and Server 2012 R2. That is in progress at the moment. Also, if you're using SQL 2012, really cool feature. SQL mirroring is embedded inside the Studio console. So if you use SQL mirroring for your databases for Xen app or provisioning services, it's there within the UI. You can see that you have your database mirrored or replicated. The predictive global monitoring is really amazing. The amount of work that we've done from transferring EdgeSight, which was our older monitoring engine, which used something called EUEM, which is Enhanced User Experience Metric Monitoring. That sort of data, that whole design has been revamped. And Director is a new way that we monitor information. I'll try to show you a little sneak peek of that. But that data, the amount of information you get from a real-time perspective is impressive, whether it's apps, desktops, loading profiles, time to log in. Did I have a machine that did a register? Can I get alerts on that? All that information is available right in Director. And it's in the same VM as well. So let's go over the current architecture overview. And I bring this up because a lot of people are Xen app administrators, but they're not really so savvy about XenDesktop, because in a big environment, like where I came from 5-6 years ago, I was the enterprise Xen app administrator. I didn't necessarily know a lot of my other teammates around the globe, but we did interact. So there's a lot of things I knew, and at that point in time, VDI was this new thing that was like a buzzword, and people wanted to try it out in our organization. So that was the first time I'd ever seen it. But there are things that my other teammates didn't know. So it's important to understand the differences when we get into version 7, because it's really a night and day difference in terms of acronyms and things that we call them. Controllers are very simple. A controller's whole job in life is to broker a connection to something. He's the middleman. He's the cop, the traffic cop in the middle, saying, you go this way, stop, that's your desktop, that's your app, this is what you get. That is the whole job of a controller. Or an example, he could be the man sitting back there controlling which way an airplane goes or lands. That's the whole function of what controller does. Controller also has policies that are applicable towards desktops or apps at any given time that you can create from the same Studio UI. Workers, that's the fun part. That's the virtual desktop part of everything. And workers consist of either apps or desktops. Now, they can be something is super fast in terms of like a Windows client, Windows 7, Windows 8, in terms of these fast jets. More personal VDIs. That is more of a worker. Now, if you look at that A380, that's more of a shared infrastructure. That worker could be Xen app. That worker could be XenDesktop. That worker is Xen app 2012, 2008 R2. That's really what that worker is in terms of shared infrastructure. One server operating system, lots of people hitting it. That's that shared worker model. And of course, in those workers, we support all those operating systems, from Windows XP all the way up to Server 2012. In terms of the architecture, let's take a look at what we have here. We still have Studio. So Studio is your main man. He is your personal interface into building. If you think of yourself as an artist and you have your canvas in front of you, Studio is what you would use to paint and design everything that you would build from desktops to apps, start to finish. It's the only interface you need for building stuff. On the other side, you have Director, which I mentioned earlier. That is what you use for monitoring, troubleshooting, looking at performance, getting stats, getting registration information. Studio is that interface. Now, that's web-based, which is really nice. You can go to any PC on the network and access it. You don't need to load a UI. You just go right to the URL, and you can get it. You can assign rights in Studio. You can assign rights in Director, what they can and can't see. The catalog infrastructure in terms of the left, if we take a look here, it's pretty important. Each of these catalogs are things that you want to take into consideration if you're dealing with legacy operating systems to the newer stuff. Some people catalog items based on application access. You may have some applications that are really, really, really super old, older versions of SAP that really can't run on Server 2012. For whatever reason, you have those cataloged and isolated on Server 2000 R2. Or maybe you have some applications that are older versions of Office that you're not quite ready to port over to Windows 8. Those may run on Windows 7 or maybe Windows XP. Those sort of siloing and segmentation is kind of what catalogs are about. Now, all those catalogs belong to something called a group. If you think of like OUs are nested in Active Directory, you have a group or an OU, and then you have groups. And groups are kind of like that, where you have the OU at the top, and inside that group are your actual VMs. And those are the VMs that are part of what you're going to connect to. That's what the broker makes a connection to. So Studio does everything, as I mentioned. We configure all the desktops through Studio. It's mainly, if you're going to build desktops, it is mostly going to be used for machine creation services. If you're a provisioning server fan or architect, we are not quite at that point, but we are working very closely to have that integrated into one UI. That is coming very, very soon. In terms of updates and workers, everything from Studio connects to your infrastructure, whether it's Hyper-V, whether it's Zen Server, whether it's vSphere. Everything is connected from Studio, just like it was in version 5.6 of Zen Desktop. But the beauty of it is you deliver both apps and desktops from that same portal. And we'll go through that in a little bit of a demo. So let's go ahead and show that. Okay, great. Can everyone see my screen okay? All right, so what you're looking at here is the Studio console. Now, like all good cooks, I've done my work and I've prepared my dish ahead of time. So I'm not going to go through creating a ton of stuff because I will probably crush this little laptop right next to me. But I will show you what I have created, and I'll walk you through a little bit of what we have. So looking through the UI, again, we mentioned earlier we have the catalogs that are created here. I have a ton of catalogs based upon what I'm delivering. It could be Server 2012, Windows 7, hosted apps, personal desktops that are mine, that are not pooled. They could be physical desktops, such as Remote PC is another architecture of Zen Desktop, where you want to remote into a physical machine in a cube or in an office because you're not quite ready to go full-fledged VDI, but you've got a perfectly good working PC. Why not just put an agent on it? That's your first real way to get your feet wet into VDI because you are virtually accessing something. So a remote desktop is another way you can make it even simpler to just get your feet wet and test something. Now, if we look down at groups, everything is bound to a group, as I mentioned. A catalog is part of a group. I have different groups here. I have Server 2008, R2. I have hosted shared. I have hosted everything. Each of these are relative because they kind of are married to each other, like husband and wife. You can't go one without the other. And when they're married together, that's when they work perfectly. So you can create a catalog, fine, but you won't have anything until you create a group. They must go hand in hand. That's how you get access to it. So let's go through the process of what that looks like. All right, so I've got some applications here. I've got some groups. And what I'd like to go ahead and do is show you what that process would look like if I wanted to create a new catalog. So I'll click Create Machine Catalog. And this process is pretty simple. Nothing too super complex. Studio will start up, and then it's going to ask me a couple questions about what I would like to do. So by step, I can go ahead and say, well, I'm going to create server apps. I'm going to create desktop apps. I can go through as much as I want. I'll click Next. And here's my choice. Whenever I was mentioning earlier, you can do physical, you can do virtual, you can do remote, you can do whatever you want. All of that in terms of publishing or creating desktops through Studio is available right there from that single UI. So let's say I wanted to make a broker to this machine over here. I would simply say Remote PC Access. And I could click Next. And I would simply go through the process of adding my machine. Because it's physical, I have to go and browse Active Directory and add that machine in right through here for that same UI. So I'm just going to filter and look for a bunch of machines. And right here is my laptop right over there. I'll click OK. Now, I already have this machine added as a different group, so it's going to give me an error in just a few minutes here, but you'll see that pop up. Let's go ahead and call this test. And you can see a machine's already allocated. So I've already done that work. It's going to say, hey, you can't go add the same machine twice. That's kind of silly. But effectively, if I went through that process, that's what it would be like, because I'm making a connection to a physical machine. If I went down that route again and I said, okay, well, it's not physical, I'm actually going to connect to my hypervisor and I want to do some desktop OSs, I'd select here whether I'm doing physical machines, but here I'm doing virtual. I'm going to select provisioning services. I'll say I want to use to connect to random desktop, and I'll click next. At this point, it says, hey, go ahead and put in the name of your provisioning server. 2.18, if that's correct. And it should expand everything within my collection site, which is what I already have created. So I have some Windows 2012 desktops. I'm just going to create one more. Collection, I'll click next. And we'll say Win 2012 test. Oops. Yep, I already have one created. So same thing. I've done that work already. I've created desktops that's smart enough to know you have desktops already created. Don't add any more. So that's kind of what that process looks like for creating desktops. But what if we wanted to create applications? That's the next part of Stew that makes it really intelligent. Same thing applies. Let's say I have AppV in the mix. If you're not an AppV customer or you're interested in it, we have some other sessions you can listen and learn from that Microsoft did a great job of presenting the AppV architecture. But in terms of integration from the studio, we natively 100% integrate with the AppV management content server right from the UI. If you're a customer that's using Citrix application streaming, the product is still there. However, the product features have not been changed, meaning that they will not support Server 2012. They will not support Windows 8. We will 100% from here on out pretty much use AppV5 as a standard because of the enhancements and capabilities it brings specifically to the VDI platform. So that's the route that Citrix has decided to go. But the beauty of it is you can use PowerShell all day and all night to connect to that infrastructure remotely. So if I want to create an app, let's kind of see what we have here. I already did create some apps earlier, but we'll kind of show you what I have. Here I have some Windows 7 hosted apps. Actually, better yet, let's take a look at what I have in terms of my groups. On this tab over here, I have a list of applications. Now, these are apps I've already published from the same Studio console. I've got Excel, I've got Word, I also have XML Notepad. Now, that is an AppV published app. The great thing about it is it was as simple as me going through the process of creating an application like I did here. I go next, and it'd say, well, what would you like to choose from? I'll say I'll do Windows 2000 R2. Now, at this point, it's going to query the virtual image, and it's going to look for a variety of things. It's going to look for either local installed apps, or it's going to fetch and enumerate apps from the AppV content server. It's going to say, give me what you got, bring it down to the UI, and then let me execute PowerShell to go ahead and deliver that app to that desktop or server. So I could select an AppV app, command prompt if I wanted to. I could go a little bit further and just select a couple other things, maybe just like Microsoft Mathematics. So these are apps I can do right straight from this UI that are AppV based. If I want to add apps manually, I could also do that and just browse that machine to the path.exe. And that's it. I click Finish. He's going to go talk to AppV, run some nice PowerShell commands in the background, fetch that application, and deliver it back into the Studio UI. That's it. It was that simple for me to publish the applications. So let's go back, and we will switch over to our other machine. Another first design. This is the first one that I talk a lot about. What you saw there was simple native application publishing within the Studio. But a lot of enterprises are really, really, truly leveraging what ConfigMan 2012 brings to the table. We've done a lot in terms of integration. This design is really critical because you'll find that a lot of people like to leverage things that they already have an investment in, such as AppV applications already sequenced. Configuration Manager integration with XenApp is really that single pane of glass that allows you to publish apps directly into XenApp from SCCM. And it makes sense because you may have a scenario where you're looking to reduce MSI or use existing AppV packages you use on your physical machines, but now bring them over to your virtual world. That logic makes complete sense to us because we can integrate that same sequencing and publishing right from the console. So let's look at why is an app for AppV in terms of the connector. So you have your SCCM console, and we leverage things that are called deployment types that are part of SCCM for packages. If you already have an SCCM infrastructure, but you don't have an app v5 infrastructure for whatever particular business unit reason, not a problem. Use SCCM server, we'll publish apps from there to XenApp server. That's a design choice you can make based upon what your business unit says. And this is kind of how the process works. I'll go into a little bit more animated design here. But when we publish those applications, we leverage all the power of ConfigMan 2012 and user-centric device affinity. Being able to say, okay, great, I've got a variety of devices. It could be Surface, it could be RT, it could be iOS, it could be whatever I choose. But those applications don't make a difference to us because we're just going to host them centrally in a data center and deliver them from the ConfigMan console all the way to the XenApp server. So it's pretty powerful story when you have a big enterprise that uses SCCM day in and day out. So what does it do for you? Again, it unifies and gives you a single pane of glass for publishing applications. It allows receiver on any device to access that application at any given time. And allows us to gracefully determine if we're going to go ahead and publish applications in a particular time that is a maintenance cycle or maybe a time when it's not maintenance cycle. We have that sort of flexibility and control directly from SCCM. So here's a question. How do I deliver an application X to user Y? And this is probably one of the biggest challenges I've seen a lot of people ask. In this sort of scenario, let's take a look at what we have. We have Adobe Reader as the application. We have these deployment types already pre-created. It could be a mobile cab for a mobile device. It could be the app v format array sequenced. It could be MSI. It could be any of those particular deployment types. Here's the way we look about doing this. Because in Server or System Center 2012, we actually have different things where we can look at if devices are a primary for a person, if these devices have sort of the amount of hardware or resources to run an app v app. That sort of Boolean query, that logic is what we look at with the XenApp connector when we work with Config Manager 2012. If we have a machine, let's take an example. It could be my laptop. And that machine has less than 512 gig of RAM. Let's actually say it's more like a thin client to be realistic. I don't know too many laptops that have less than that gig of RAM these days. More of a thin client. It makes a lot of sense to take that Adobe Reader application that's already pre-sequenced and deliver that via XenApp. However, if it's the same user that's logging in and it's their primary PC and they have a disk that's greater than 40 gig, by all means let them take that application via app B and run it down to that machine. That sort of logic is what we look at behind the scenes and under the covers with the connector. So we can intelligently say, yes, this makes sense. Yes, run the app here. Yes, deliver it here. Yes, execute it here. If it's a user's primary device, also, like I mentioned earlier, we can assign and run that MSI package and run it that way. In terms of delivering apps, it's pretty simple. Once you have the infrastructure set up for the XenApp connector, you create your application, sequence it whatever way you decide to go. The next thing you need to do is actually go ahead and create your targeting server collection. You may have a set of XenApp 6.5 servers that this is applicable for. Majority of what I'm showing you here for the connector is only for 6.5. We are working on the next version for XenDesktop 7, so the connector at this point is still a little bit of a legacy tool. It's not inside XenDesktop 7, but no worries, we are working on it. We've got prototypes that we demonstrated a few weeks ago at Citrix Energy, so if you want to see a prototype of what this looks like for XenDesktop 7, there's a session you can watch live. We then take that deployment type and we target that based on user collections. The first release of this connector was only applicable for device collections when we're talking about SCCM 2007 R2. It had no knowledge of user affinity. Didn't care. Only cared about devices. Now, with this, we actually target both device and user if it's a primary machine or if it's not the primary machine. This is how the workflow looks like in terms of publishing it. The admin goes through the process. He creates the deployment type on the SCCM server. Once that orchestrates, it's going to go ahead and take that app in a sequence fashion, whether it's during a maintenance cycle or not. If it's a small application, you decide. He's going to push it over to the XenApp server. At that point, the connector then performs a publishing, meaning that the connector will go and say, hey, go ahead to the ConfigMan console, fetch me those apps you just published, bring them down and deliver them over to my XenApp server, all with that same user set of credentials. Then the person who's the end user, like me, has the SCCM client on their enterprise machine. Now, I can either get to the app in one of two ways. I can leverage good old receiver, or if I want to use the portal from Config Manager, I can go through it that way as well. And then pretty much we subscribe to that app if we're using the catalog, and we download it. An icon's placed on the start menu. If you're looking at doing this in a provisioning server XenApp streaming world, this is a little bit interesting as well. Same concept applies. You still have the SCCM administrator, but you have your provisioning servers in the mix where you have that common golden master XenApp image instead of 100 different XenApp servers. You still go through the process of provisioning your image, getting it ready so that you can push these applications to it, whether you're doing a maintenance mode set up from PVS or not. You can still go through that same logic. But either way, the SCCM client will orchestrate when you drain those servers to put that client package in and when you power them back up. So in terms of UI integration, it's pretty simple. The same concept applies. The user goes through, fetches the app from the catalog or from receiver. So whether it's going through XenApp with PVS and XenApp one-on-one, it doesn't matter. We can go through any one of those architectures for delivering that app. So let's go to a demo here. Now let's see if I can bring this up. Okay, great. You can see my screen. All right, so I'm remoted into a system that is pretty far away, really, really, really far away. So I'm going to go through just a small demonstration of this. This whole demo alone can take 30 minutes because we can spin it a variety of different ways. I could push this app to my Surface device. I could push it to my iOS device. So I'm going to go through just a small bit of the demo. And again, these are all recorded. You can see live, longer demos if you want to go to the MMS portal from just a few weeks ago. You can see this whole thing live as well if you want a more in-depth real user-side demo. So let's take a look at what we have in terms of our machines. Let me bring you first back to my config-man box. So here's my 2012 box. You can see I have some applications, some deployment types already pre-configured, pre-canned, ready to go. I've done some of my homework. But what does it look like if I want to publish looking at that PowerPoint? I'll go to my application site here. We'll simply right-click on it. And we'll say distribute. Sorry, bring this up. Let's use a different one. Let's use Notepad instead. There we go. My right click is just a little slow. And we'll go down. Come on. Come on. There we go. Create deployment type. The first thing it's going to do is bring up a menu UI. What we've done, again, because some of this work I've done for you for this demo, there actually is an extension of the SCCM console. You'll see that there's a little XenApp publications right there. There is a console extender for SCCM, so I've already done that. This is all documented as part of the guide, but we actually do install a console first. You just don't see XenApp if you go to look in your console. You have to install an extender. An extender is what allows you to talk via PowerShell to the XenApp servers, to the farms, and enumerate what you can deliver from the console. I'll select the drop-down menu here, and we'll select XenApp 6.5. Now that's what you'll see because we already have the console extended. It's a choice for us to choose when we publish apps. Let's just say Chrome as an example, and we'll say test. We'll click next, and we'll click add. Oops. And we'll just select, we'll select any one of these. It's not going to make a difference. We'll select Firefox just to keep it simple. We'll swap back and forth between the two of these. And it's going to say I already have one, but I'm just going to say yes because I already provisioned this earlier today. And I'll click next. Now at this point, it's going to go through, run the process, go to the point of saying, hey, is this a legitimate app? Let's go ahead and say yes and okay. And now there's a task scheduler that's involved. It's not just going to go ahead and say, send me that app right away. We have some control, some mechanism to say, hey, every 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever that may be, go talk back to the config-man server or the power capacity management server that's in the middle between powering servers up or down, determining maintenance, and then bring that app back to me. If I go to the XenApp server here, there's a little bit of a delay, so it's not going to show up right away, but you can see some of these other apps were the ones that I published from that SCCM console all the way across the wire to my XenApp server. That's going to take that app, and because I have my XenApp worker groups already here defined in my servers OU, or my servers folder, in this case I have one, but if I had 100, doesn't matter. It's going to go through that same process and push them all with one click from config-man to my whole infrastructure. So what that really means in terms of big enterprise scalability is you have different silos of teams. Those teams that may only do SCCM administration all day and all night kind of have this reason to go out and have a couple of drinks with the XenApp guys because you guys can work together. And you can say, hey, I may be on vacation. Can you take care of me and publish some apps while I'm away? without having to give them farm architecture rights. Just simple publishing rights to publish apps. Pretty easy, pretty simple, good reason to create synergy between bigger enterprise teams. But I'm going to try to refresh this. You can see here there's a folder here in the XenApp server that's been extended, again, as part of the console extension. And it may show up, but I'll try to click refresh here. Not quite yet. But that scheduler is running in the background, and any minute he's going to go ahead and check and fetch the app and bring it back over to me. So that concludes that demo. I'm going to go ahead and switch back. Oops, let's see, hold on one more second. There we go. Perfect. Studio integrated app apps. Design number 2. This use case is pretty valid. Not everybody has a full-fledged configuration manager infrastructure like you saw right there. So the question then becomes, well, how do I publish apps if I don't have SCCM and I want to leverage AppV? I kind of did a little bit of a demonstration of that earlier, but what's nice about this is that whether you use AppV apps or whether you use native installed apps on your master image, it's a bulk publishing process. It'll go through and it'll actually fast bulk and publish all those apps to all of those particular servers in the OU. This is kind of some of the integration points that we have for the design components. I'll build this slide out because it is kind of lengthy. But in terms of everything that we do from a design, we integrate directly with the AppV Studio kit that we leverage inside XenDesktop Studio Console. That's the interface, that's the secret sauce of how we can talk straight to the AppV infrastructure and publish apps. Now, normally what we would do is we'd actually go through the Studio process in the old school ways, and we have to publish manual paths to like an SFT tray or older versions of AppV. Don't really need to do that anymore because we actually can just leverage PowerShell and directly use PowerShell from the Studio and then have the Studio talk to the broker and then talk to the virtual delivery agent and simply push down that package. The only requirement is you have the AppV client. Matter of fact, you don't even have to have the AppV client pointed to a server. We can point it for you. As long as you have the client and you're, like me, I'm a lazy admin. I might forget to put in my group policy. I might forget to push a location of my AppV server. As long as my client's there, boom, I can use PowerShell commands directly from Studio and enable that virtual delivery agent to go and fetch and bring that application and its icons down for me. So in terms of publishing, I kind of showed this earlier, but we'll go through a little bit of a demo. Logically and technically underneath the covers, this is how it works. We actually have something called CTX AppV Launcher, which is what we use to talk to and communicate back and forth. We go in and fetch the GUIDs that are relative to that package for AppV, and then we bring those down directly through the virtual delivery agent so the user sees those applications. And all that information is leveraging the synchronizer from AppV as well, so we can get that information, that content synchronized on demand. If you launch the app, guess what? It doesn't matter. You can launch the application in a variety of ways. You can launch it from Windows machines. You can launch it from iOS machines, Android. The list goes on and on. It really doesn't matter because you can pick and choose those devices, but the beauty of it is you still get that AppV app delivered to you the same way you did on a physical machine. The endpoint user experience is important. We have some interesting new tools that are part of XenDesktop 7 that will allow you to intelligently figure out, for example, if you have the AppV application installed and you have the client there, we have some agent tools that will say, hey, I see this client's there, but I also know you want that app also delivered via XenApp. I'm just going to go ahead and run it natively through receiver as a local AppV app. So there's some intelligence, kind of like fallback, so we can figure out when is the right time to execute local versus when is the right time to execute hosted applications that are AppV based. So let's go back to a demo here. Oops, I keep doing that. One more second. Let's get this right. There we go. All right, so I will remove from this session. Can you see the screen okay? Great. All right, so let's take a look at what we have. I already went through some of this process, but let's take a look one more time at what this looks like. I can refresh at any time to go ahead and refresh those lists of apps, query the AppV server, fetch them, bring it back down, and deliver them inside the Studio UI. Now here I already have mathematics and I have XML Notepad. If I go to the properties of it, we can see a little bit more information about what it's doing. So the delivery type is going to be an app, and the location here is pointing right to the AppV server. So by default, we've published it. We went through that same process in the wizard before you saw, but it knows to go fetch and deliver and bring that app from the AppV server. So let's see if we can go ahead and show a little bit of what a demo of that looks like. Bear with me 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and flip over to this machine. Okay, great. So I have my Surface device here in front of me. I'm going to go ahead and log into that. And by default, I've got all those applications that you saw in the studio. All my hosted desktops appear for me because I published them to my user account. But at the same time, you can see I already had a cached application I created earlier. And the XML Notepad app that I published straight from the AppV server from the studio launched. That's that easy. I went through the publishing, I created it, assigned it to the user, it did the work, talked to AppV server, it pre-cached it in my master image, brought it down as a hosted application. It's that easy now to publish the app. So that's a really, really big time saver if you're looking at publishing stuff like that. So let's go ahead and go back to our machine. Okay, one more time. Let's go 4. There we go. Great. Now, what if, I mentioned earlier, you are forgetful? It's one of those days where you make a mistake. It's Friday. I did some work, but I forgot to publish my icons. I got lazy. It was Miller time, as we call it in the US. Easy way to fix that, right? You can publish the icons directly from the studio, just with PowerShell. Pretty simple. So all you need is either rights to the controller like you would as a good Zen desktop administrator, or you can do it through group policy management. This is just another way that you can actually leverage the SDK from AppV that we integrate with. Now, the interesting part about that is that we publish this using PowerShell. And these icons can appear on the master image, whether it's Windows 7, Windows 2012, just straight using PowerShell. So it's more of like a tip and trick. It's not something that we really recommend, but if you make a mistake and you forget to publish your icons, as long as you have the AppV client on there, you can still use PowerShell to make those icons appear. Because the app's pretty much not really good without an icon to double click on, so you need that. Here's what the PowerShell command looks like. You'd actually run all this from the controller. You run a get desktop broker group to enumerate the groups you want to publish it to. You then go through it and get a Git broker machine, which goes ahead and enumerates all the AppV blob sites at the level, fetches them, queries them. And then you go through the rest of this process of finding the UID for the desktop group. Now, the interesting thing about this is a broker cannot remove the icons. So if you publish these icons just for the sake of you forgot to do it, you can't remove them from PowerShell. You've got to go back and manually delete them. So it is a use case, a very small use case. If you make a mistake and you want to just have fun or do something with PowerShell, you can do it this way. Local app access. This is one of the ones I really, really like. I played with this project 2.5 years ago, and I'm super happy that it's finally here in version 7. I really love it because what it is another unique application scenario. And what does local app access really mean in English, or in most simplistic terms? You make a virtual desktop infrastructure. You make your app store. You publish them. You get all of that needed for the user. But then you run into a situation where you find out, hey, you know what, Sally Jo is working from finance, and I don't know how, but she has this archaic file on her machine. Better yet, this archaic app. This app that it opens old files, and it just doesn't work in the new virtual infrastructure, in the new version of Office. It's this old macro. Local app access allows us to use the security of Zen Desktop 7 to reverse a connection from your virtual machine all the way through the protocol, through the wire, to the machine you're on and launch an application. It could be a Windows 2008 R2 shared desktop you connected to. It could be a 2012. It could be Windows 8. It could be Windows 7. It could be any of those. So let me show you what that looks like. Let's go ahead and do a quick demonstration of that. Okay. That is not the right one. One more second. There we go. 1. I'm sorry. Much better. There we go. All right, let's go back to our Surface device, and I'm going to minimize this, or just bring up receiver. Now, I have some desktops already created. But let's say, for example, I need to get to this program right here, this old version of Excel 2007. It's archaic because my file's archaic. I need to get execution rights to this file, but I know Office 2010, 2013, for whatever logical reason, can't run this file. How do we do it? It's pretty simple. We're going to log into our shared desktop here. And once we connect, we're going to go through, log in, load the profile as normal. It's going to do some intelligence, though. I've applied the appropriate security permissions to the group, to the user to say, you know what? I trust you. I trust where you're coming from. But yet, I trust that you want to run Excel on your machine from your virtual desktop. When I open up the session, we'll make it full screen here, just so you can see everything. Okay, can you see that okay? Good. So again, I'm on my hosted shared Server 2012 desktop. This is the Excel app that's on my local machine. If you don't believe me, I can show you control panel. I have 0 apps on here, nothing. It's vanilla. Now I've opened up the app, it's launched. Again, this is reversed, meaning that it's executing through my virtual session even though it lives here. Well, that's cool, but I actually need to open a file. And so let's see what kind of file I've got. The best one in the world, Pac-Man. So I've used the app, I've used data, I've remoted it through my virtual session, delivered it on demand, and I have full access to play. Sorry. I'm not that great at Pac-Man. But you get the point, right? That's a valid DNA design use case. You have this design where you need to get that app under whatever circumstance it is, good or bad, and that data. In XenDesktop 7, you can do that. Pretty cool. You can applaud. That's okay. I accept them. Thank you. All right, so let's get back to the presentation. We're getting short on time, and I think I might have 1 or 2 more demos to go. Let's flip over to this one. I published all those machines, but what a lot of people say is, hey, you know what? I have iOS devices. What I'm showing you now is a prototype of H.264 codec compression that is not out in XenDesktop 7, coming soon to a theater near you, but I'm doing something a little bit unique. I'm going to go ahead and show you how far away this machine is I'm connecting to. So this is going to have about 50, 45 millisecond latency. I did this in a hotel last night at 200 millisecond latency. And that's how impressive the user experience is for mobility factor with XenDesktop. So I'll do a start ping. Again, I'm connected via this iPad wirelessly. 67, 53. It's going to fluctuate as much as it wants. Let's minimize that and go back to receiver. And then let's reconnect to this desktop. Now, this is my Windows 8 virtual desktop hosted that far away. I don't remember where the data center is, but you can tell in terms of delay, it's definitely in the United States somewhere. I've got full touch interface here with this desktop. Full Charms menu access. If for whatever reason I like classic start menu, not a problem. I can go to here, switch, and I have my start menu appearing right there. Again, from an iOS device. This is something that's really native and special about Receiver that makes it easier for that user experience from a mobility standpoint. So we've done that, but that's all great and dandy, but what actually does it look like if I want to do something legitimate and I actually want to see what that user experience looks like in terms of video rendering? Again, this is all H.264 driven, 100%. We'll play this video and let's show you what this looks like. Can we have audio back there, please? Pretty impressive. That far latency going through a wireless device. That is what the value is that we bring to the table. all H.264. You're going to get that automatically when you're using the new version of receiver for Windows-based devices, but this is a special brand that they're working on for iOS as well. So by default, the new versions of receiver that just came out for Windows will have H.264 if you're using Zen Desktop 7. So it's definitely something to think about. So that user experience, that mobility, that is important to users. Because if it stinks, they reject it, guaranteed. And they'll bring whatever other device or go to whatever other place they want to work. Okay, so let me go bounce back to our PowerPoint. So we saw local app access. And I've got another demo in store, Windows Phone 8 receiver. So I'm going to go ahead and try to show you that as well if I can. I'm going to flip over to my laptop.
Please welcome Citrix CEO, Mark Templeton.
Can you see everything okay? Great. Now I'm going to use DUV Viewer because I have a Nokia phone that was provided to me from Microsoft, so they graciously let me use this demonstration. And I'm just going to make sure first I'm connected to Wi-Fi, which I am. I can launch Citrix Receiver from my Windows phone and have full application access to all my hosted apps and desktops, all from here. Again, showing you how important mobility is. iOS, great. Windows Phone, great. Physical, Surface, doesn't matter. We support all of it with the best user experience on planet Earth, guaranteed. So this is coming. This is a prototype, soon to be coming to a theater near you. And we have one more thing left. Let me bounce over to here. So I have one more demo, and I'm going to try my best to do it. I have about 22 minutes. So bear with me. And if you watch Synergy, you are familiar that we did something that's called touchless interaction with Zen Desktop. I've yet to see Minority Report, but I'm looking forward to seeing it on the way home, because I have 8 hours to kill on the airplane tomorrow. If you want to bear with me and hang on, I only have one extra device, so I'm limited, or else I would jump right into showing this to you. So give me just a second, and what I'll do is I'm going to close all of my connections here. And if everything works out, we should be able to show you this device and show you this demo. Just give me just a second. We'll go ahead and connect. Okay, perfect. That's done. Now let me switch over to this tablet. Any questions so far? Is this all making sense? Pretty simple? In terms of publishing apps, publishing desktops, all one UI, all one console. Let me go ahead and minimize all of this. Now, I don't know if this will work because it is a risk I'm taking, but I guarantee you I know it worked because I built the demo for Synergy Keynote, so I can show you this via video later on. But we're going to try this. We're going to be a little bit risky, and let's see what happens. It may or it may not work. So let me log in, and I have my desktop here. And let's see if I can connect to it correctly. Okay, give this a second to load. All right, so what the objective here is to show you that obviously we support touch. It's a given. We support it on Surface, we support it on iOS. But what would be really neat is if we could do stuff that is touchless. So let me grab my mouse back here, and I will go to my desktop, and I'm going to attempt to do this. And I have my fingers crossed, because this is untested yet by me. Let's see if this works. Oh, darn it. Let me plug it in. 1 second. I'll try one more time. Well, it's not going to work from this device. I guarantee you it would work from another device. It was a little bit of a risk. We do have another machine. I can show you this later on if you really want to see it. But effectively, what we can do is we actually can use this device here by a company called Leap Motion, if you've heard of them. It's probably the hottest technology on the planet right now if you are into things that are Minority Report-like or touchless. This device allows, and will allow, coming soon in the release of the developer code, full touchless interface action with the Windows operating system. swipe to move, gestures, swipe to the start menu, swipe to use Internet Explorer. This is all accessible with no touch. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't look like I can do this from the Surface device. We did try earlier with another PC, but I was kind of short on devices. I can only fit 4 up here. So I did the best I can. But I guarantee you, if you want to see it, it is on Citrix.com. That same video we were watching, that same Synergy keynote, about halfway through, you'll see this work. So that is what we're kind of working on as well, touchless interaction, being able to go to that next generation of touch, keyboard, no touch, all through HDX. And that is what I have. So let me go back to my slide. Bear with me one moment. I was hoping to do that, but again, I'll show it to you later if you like. Key takeaways, I'm going to end just a little bit early so we can take questions. Again, we support all the latest and greatest in terms of operating systems from Microsoft, the latest platform. If you are super cutting edge and you want to do R2 of Server 2012 or 8.1, please hold off. We're working on coding. Again, they're still releasing code, and of course, as they release code, we code at the same time. We just released version 7. Again, it only supports Windows 8 and Server 2012 because we couldn't make code that supported beta products in order to make our code RTM. It just doesn't work that way. So please don't try that. We're working on it. We'll have support very, very soon. In terms of integration, again, everything that we look at is AppV. If you're an old school Citrix customer and you use CAS or Citrix application streaming, still there, still workable, if that's a word, but not accessible in the UI, and only available if you're using Windows 7 or Windows XP or 2000 R2. You cannot use it in Server 2012, and you cannot use it in Windows 8. Right? We fully embrace AppV as a first-class citizen pretty much from here on out. So now let's give something away. Normally, if you read in the session agenda, I have really cool solid-state drives, but I ran out. And so I had to get something even cooler. So if you are flying home, you probably don't want to hear the people in back of you. So I'm going to give away a really nice, expensive pair, just as expensive as a solid-state drive set of headphones. I'm going to make it real simple, and I'm going to ask one question. If you could answer it, the first person that raises their hand, not now, first person I see, I'm just going to throw this to you. Normally, I'd have fun with you guys. I'd make you come up stage, we'll play rock, paper, scissors, but I've realized not everybody knows how to play that game across the world, so we'll make it easy. What is the codec that we're using now in Zen Desktop 7? Black shirt, glasses. Can you repeat that again, please? H264 is correct. You're the winner. Come on up. All right, Q&A. If you have any questions, please feel free. There you go. Thank you. You're welcome. Please feel free to come up, ask any questions you may have. Related content, of course, there's AppV sessions that were done earlier. You want to do your homework and actually listen to some of those, look at some of the new stuff in terms of AppV 5. And then I did another session just a couple days ago in terms of scalability. So if that's what you're interested in, definitely go ahead and take a look at that. And please fill out your evaluation and tell me good, bad, loved it, wish you had more things to give away. Any of that feedback's important to me. Thank you very much.